Okay, so it's Mailbag Monday, or well, technically it isn't because I already got these parts last week, but I finally had the time to show them on camera. So very recently I purchased some very interesting new toys from ElmorLabs.com. So the very same website where I purchased the EVC2, the very famous modding tool for graphics cards, motherboards and so on. So you might remember Elmor. He was one of the main guys behind the latest ROG overclocking motherboards over at Asus. He now runs his own business, so he technically isn't behind the employed R&D team over at Asus. I think he still does some overclocking for Asus when needed be, but his main focus and his main job is his new business. But anyways, so many of these parts I really want to show them to you guys, as if you are someone like me, then those will definitely be very interesting for you as well. So and the good thing about ElmorLabs products is that they are actually quite cheap. They aren't expensive at all. They have some amazing value, trust me. So just stay tuned and let's go through them very quickly. I want to just show them briefly on camera now, as I cannot demonstrate all of them in front of the camera, as I don't have, for example, I don't have LN2 at the moment, so we have to check the temperature meter later. But anyway, so let's get started. So the first one, or I'll just quickly take them off the packaging and let's quickly go through them together. So sorry, it's a little bit of a mess from my previous LN2 overclocking session, but I'm sure we can get through the parts very just fine. So let's open up this one first. So we have one of these thermal pads. So you can purchase those blue thermal pads that I've been using quite a lot recently, behind Inferno backplates, both CPU and the GPU Inferno. I actually have one over here. This is the GPU Inferno I've been using behind one of the 3090 Kimping graphics cards. So you can attach this very thermal pad behind the graphics card, so between the Inferno backplate and the card's PCB, and it should provide enough heat transfer from the Inferno heater to the graphics card, especially the memory chips, because you need to maintain the memory chips on these latest graphics cards, so 3090, warm enough, or you will lose performance a lot. So for example, when I was running 3090 in TimeSpy Extreme single graphics card, if I had everything correct, my score would have been 14,500 something in TimeSpy Extreme single card, but as the memory chips were getting too cold, my score was only 13,600. So I lost 1,000 points in that specific test in the graphics card part. So that's why you need to maintain the memory chips warm enough, and technically this happens after something like minus 150 degrees Celsius or minus 140, minus 150. So if you don't have anything to keep the memory chips warm enough, you will lose performance a lot. So technically the whole testing becomes worthless, because you cannot get the desired performance if the memory chips are too cold. So there's those, and some of the switches I purchased. So these are good for modding. So if you do a vGPU mod or a memory mod on a graphics card, you can solder the modding point wires onto these three legs of these switches, so you can pretty much make the graphics card stock again if you disable the mod by turning the switch. Until recently, I have always used those 2-pin headers, or 2-pin wires, which are often used in computer PC cases, some of the front panel cases, start and reset buttons. I just plug in the VR onto those 2-pin header, and then I just remove it if I want to remove the modification. That has risks, so if you install the variable resistor the wrong way around, you can damage the card instantly, and for good. So that's why this might be even a better solution than using those 2-pin wires. So will be interesting. I'll I'll probably try these later. And these are actually very cheap, only a few dollars or so for this whole pack. So definitely worth the price. Some of these, then I purchased 2 of these K-type thermocouple probes. These are the thin ones, so you can use these for like memory sticks, like memory heat sinks, individual memory heat sinks. You cannot use the Kimping Cooling K-type thermocouple probe, the binned ones, on individual memory sticks, as they are too large, or the probes they are too large and too stiffy. You need to use some of these smaller ones in individual memory sticks. So I'm not sure if these ones from Elmor are binned, like what kind of reading do they give when you dip them in liquid nitrogen. We'll have to see that. We'll have to see that for ourselves later. So this is one of the things I cannot test right now. But these are only like, if I remember correctly, I actually have my phone over here. So the pack of 2 K-type thermocouple probes was $10. So they are 1.5 meters per probe. Then the 3-leg terminal switches, the pack over here, that was $5. And then the thermal pads, they are $5 each for the thinner ones. So this one is 2.5 millimeters thick. 8 millimeter thick one is $8 each. So I purchased both as I want to try different thicknesses behind the graphics card. So between the graphics card and the Inferno heater unit. But those are pretty much those. So not expensive, definitely worth the price, as I already said. And next one. Okay, so you are probably familiar. I'm not actually sure was this provided with the unit, probably, but anyway, so I'm sure you are familiar with the Kimping Cooling Inferno heater units. Just one of those that I just showed you. This is the Elmor heater unit. So this is pretty much the same thing as the Inferno from Kimping Cooling, but the only difference between these two is that on the Kimping Cooling Inferno unit, the heater source is directly behind the central processing unit, so the motherboard CPU, or directly behind the graphics card's GPU. And that's not the target we want to heat up. So many people, like for example, if I think Splave, so the number 1 overclocker at the moment on Hardware Bot, he generally doesn't use the CPU Inferno unit. Some people still think that if you use the CPU Inferno, it actually drops your maximum CPU core frequency by a tiny bit. I haven't noticed this myself. I've always used the CPU Inferno backplate just fine, but it's at least theoretically possible. So this is a lot better way of doing this, especially with CPUs. So with CPUs, you don't need that much power, like you don't need that much heat at the socket area and so on compared to like 3090. With 3090, you need to use a lot of heat to maintain warm enough temperature on the memory chips. So this one, the center is not heated at all. So the heat is directly around the socket area, so directly around the CPU, and that's where we want the heat, at least when it comes to motherboards. We want the CPU, the exact spot where the CPU is, as cold as possible, but then we want all of the other surface around the CPU on the motherboard warm, so at around like ambient room temperature, so there's no moisture at all. So I think this is a lot better way of doing it, or doing this the way Elmor has done. So I will definitely try this when I next time try LM2. So you connect the device onto this PCI Express 6-pin power. So this gets power from the 6-pin PCI Express connector, just like the Inferno unit from Kimping Cooling. So the power like card is a separate device, so it can be a little bit away from the unit itself, and you just connect the two together with this provided cable over here. But this is, I definitely want to try this. Elmor actually had a thicker like plate, which was like one solid plate with the center not being heated, although there was PCB at the center, but that was sadly out of stock, so I couldn't get it. The only difference was that it was actually a little bit thicker. The plate, so this one over here was a little bit thicker. I think it was like 3 millimeters or so, and it cost only like $10 on top of this. You still needed this unit, of course, but sadly I couldn't get it. So I think Elmor is working on something newer at the time being, so I'll be getting one of those when it comes out, but this one is definitely not expensive. So again, I cannot compare it to the Inferno from Kimping Cooling, as I don't have LN2 at the moment, but I'll do that later when I get the chance. So the ElmorLabs hot heater controller and the backplate, and yeah, this is provided with the heater unit. That's $35 in total. It's not expensive at all, trust me. I think it's definitely worth the price. So that's one of the main units I got with this shipment. So definitely thumbs up to Elmor for this awesome kit. Of course, I purchased all of these parts myself, so these aren't sponsored. And we have some stickers for my thermos flasks. And then let's check this one over here. So if you ever wanted to measure the total power consumption of your main computer parts, this is a device you must get. So this one over here is the ElmorLabs PMD, or Power Measurement Device. Okay, so I was opening up the wrong package. So this one over here is the Elmor PMD, as you can read over here. So very often when we check like power consumptions on many, like if you watch some YouTube videos, people usually like measure the power of the entire system. So motherboard, CPU, graphics card, all of the different peripherals combined. That's not what we want to see. We want to measure the exact power of the CPU or the graphics card. And this is where this particular device is very, very handy. So you can measure. So here we have 2 CPU 8-pin power connectors, and here we have 3 PCI Express 8-pin power connectors. So we can, for example, if we run the 28-core Xeon, the W3175X, we can connect the 2 CPU EPS 8-pin power cables over here, and then these to the motherboard, and then we can just measure with this little display that comes on top what's the exact power consumption of the CPU when we run some load like TimeSpy Extreme, CPU test, Cinebench, and so on. So that's a lot more accurate way of doing it. So it's pretty much the same as if we use like a clamp meter to measure the current that flows through those 8-pin CPU power connector cables. So that's very, very handy. And the same thing goes for the graphics card. So we can measure the power consumption of each of these like single connectors or the graphics card total from these 3 connectors. Of course, with graphics cards, you need to remember that there's some power coming from the PCI Express slot as well, so from the motherboard, and no, it's not 75 watts. 75 watt reading is only the ATX standard of the PCI Express slot. So in a real world situation, when you do heavy overclocking, the amount of power that comes from the PCI Express slot can be a lot higher. I was discussing about this with Elmor, and he told me he has seen readings of around 140 watts with 3090 or similar card just on water cooling. So almost double the amount that's mentioned on the paper. And the same thing goes for the PCI Express cables as well. They can deliver a lot more than the values that I mentioned on the paper. So on the paper, the single 8-pin PCI Express power connector can only deliver 150 watts, but in the real world, it can obviously deliver a lot more, because if you have been watching some of these extreme overclocking videos, like one from OGS, they showed that a single Galax 3090 Hall of Fame was drawing like 1100 watts in TimeSpy Extreme. So if you divide 1100 with 3, that's well above 300 watts per connector. So like over double the amount that's mentioned on the paper. And yes, you can connect this to the EVC2. So if you want to do some data logging, you can log all of the values and save them if you connect this to the EVC2. But for someone like me, this is a very good device if you ask me, and it only costs $45. I think it's quite cheap. And I need to get more acquainted with this device, so I don't know what this button over here does. Maybe you can select like what's being measured, like some of these individual connectors, just the CPU, maybe just the graphics card, and then this like whole in total, like what the CPU and graphics card are drawing at the same time in total. So, but I think it's still very, very handy. So you could use this in some like normal CPU or graphics card reviews to measure the exact power consumption of the target device. So, and you get the display itself with the packaging. This is probably not sure where you connect this. Is this to the EVC2? Not sure. I need to check that from the guide. And you could build. I think you get some acrylic like casing for this thing. But yeah, you get a case for this whole unit, and you get the cables. So 2 CPU power cables and 3 graphics card power cables. So definitely worth the price if you ask me once again. $45. And the last device of the whole lot is what I would recommend the most for anyone who's someone like me, and it's the one I was going to open not that long ago. So this is the KTH K-type thermometer. So this is one of the devices if you are, let's say, like an absolute beginner for extreme overclocking and you want to try dry ice liquid nitrogen for the first time. This is one of the devices I would heavily recommend you to obtain from the get-go. So it's a dual input K-type thermometer, and it can read down to -200 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty good. It works with 2 3A batteries, or seems to be, and you can also connect this to, I'm pretty sure you can connect this to the EVC2 as well. And the good thing about that particular unit is that it's pretty real time, so it has pretty real time update, just like the famous like Fluke thermometers. Like I really have liked these Fluke thermometers because it has like real-time update. It doesn't like update every half a second or so. That was the main issue with these cheaper thermometers like the 10 mass TM82N. This one is very accurate. The only bad side about this particular meter is that it doesn't update like in real time. So it like updates the reading like every half a second or 3 times per second. So it's not like instant. The good thing, or the superiority of this particular meter, is that this can actually go below -200 even with K-type thermocouple probe. I think, as far as I know, this is the only meter that can measure under 200 degrees Celsius. Of course, if you had the chance to try liquid helium or similar cooling solutions, you would use T-type thermocouple, which is meant for the most extreme temperatures like -250 degrees, -230 degrees Celsius. But you can actually measure those temperatures with the 10 mass TM82N. Of course, I'm not like fully aware is it accurate, but most of the accuracy actually comes from the used probe. So any of these meters will read very bad values if the probe is very bad. I already demonstrated this in my Fluke 52 unboxing and overview video, where the standard or the default probes that Fluke provides, they read -214 or -215 degrees Celsius when dipped in liquid nitrogen. So that was like 20 degree error from the get-go. So even like high quality brand probes, they aren't often good. I always recommend people to get the Kimping Cooling binned ones for the large containers like CPU containers, graphics card containers. For those you need the best possible accuracy and response time. For the smaller heatsinks like Northbridge pot or any of the chipset containers or memory pot, or if you measure the temperature from the individual memory heatsink, then you need these smaller ones, which I just showed you. This meter is good, 50 to 60 euros from China, but again, not instant update. So that's where the Fluke meters come in. But of course, any of you like complete beginners, you aren't going to be purchasing a brand new Fluke thermometer because these are extremely expensive. some of these like Fluke 52.2 thermometers, these can cost like 400 euros new. That's a lot of money for just thermometer if you are like a complete beginner, if you are like a student also. I was a student when I started this hobby, so you cannot afford obviously something like this. I was lucky and I found this used. I think I paid something like 150 euros for this meter, so that's still like doable, and it was completely new, like unopened, like new in box, but still it's a lot of money. So that's where the Elmor KTH meter comes in, because that's only $45, and it has a good backlight and it has pretty much real-time update. I will add some footage filmed by Elmor in this video, so I'm pretty confident that he doesn't get angry that I use his footage, but when he uses the meter, when he runs a graphics card on LN2, it has pretty much real-time update. So that's pretty good like value for the money you spend for this meter. You also get a casing, and I mean for the front part I think, and you can also connect this to OBS. So currently I'm not using OBS when I use the capture card to film my extreme overclocking footage, but you could add this data, so the data measured by the meter, to OBS, so you could actually implement the LN2 container reading to the display, so what you guys see. So that would be enough probably in my case. So I don't have very good like setup and room at the moment to display the monitor and the rig at the same time when I show you when I pour to the container. The most interesting part is in the actual like temperature readout. So if I get like more in depth about this whole thing, I could add the temperature readout to the screen, so you get like a bit better idea like what's going on. The actual pouring isn't so important. The temperature like readout is what should be integrated in the footage that I'm doing at the moment. But yeah, wide ambient range and should be typical K-type accuracy. It says it can read down to -261, so the temperatures of liquid helium, and yes, I have to correct myself, they did use this meter when they ran the latest generation, so this one on liquid helium. So it should be like liquid helium approved, but of course K-type is not meant for temperatures below -200 degrees Celsius. You would have to use T-type for the best accuracy, but it's still great that it's ready for liquid helium. Not sure if you get any of the probes with the whole thing. I think not. So you get some of these like standoffs and screws. You get the casing, but that's pretty much it. So you need to purchase the probes separately. So $45 for the unit and $10 for the probes if you purchase the ones that are available at ElmorLabs.com. But again, I will demonstrate this meter myself in the next extreme overclocking session. So yeah, those are pretty much the parts that I purchased. So I will be doing more footage, especially with the power measurement device. So I will put all of the links to these products down in the description box of this video. So definitely check them out. If any of these parts got you interested, then definitely check them out. So great temperature meter. And as I already told you the prices, they are very affordable. You cannot call any of these parts like too expensive. They are very, very good in value, trust me. So huge thumbs up to Elmor. There aren't that many like very knowledgeable like engineers and so on who really want to help us like extreme overclockers and like PC modders and whatever you want to call us. So I really respect Elmor in every way, how he puts a lot of like time and effort to help guys like me. But yeah, so if you like this, if you like to see these parts, then definitely give me a thumbs up and check them out over at ElmorLabs.com, and subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the more in-depth tests. And thanks for watching one of my videos once again, and I'll see you on the next one.